Welcome and everyone, and thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET Hoots. I'm your host, Kevin McPherson. We were off on Monday. We did not do a show. Plenty to talk about. Still lots to talk about. We're going to have shows every day through the week as it's not only March Madness around the country, but for the Razorbacks in definitely in the thick of things out there in the West Regional. Wheels up today for the Razorbacks, flying out to Portland, Oregon. We talked about this when we did our selection show Sunday night, right after the field was announced. I gave my initial reaction to the strength of the brackets. We looked a little bit at Arkansas's bracket, and the one thing I said was that was really puzzling. I didn't have a problem with the seed. I thought that was fair. What I didn't like is the fact that Arkansas got sent out to Portland, Oregon instead of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And it's not that you're always going to get your way and get to play close to home. Even one seed sometimes leave their area, not often, and the way that the NCAA tournament has set up the pods, they kind of got away from that and try to reward the one seeds and some of the other stronger seeds. But four is a strong seed, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, including a tweet I put out. We're going to talk about some recognition, national recognition that came down for two future five-star Hogs. We know there are three of them that were signed in the early period out of the class of 2026. I'm going to go through a little bit more about Arkansas in the NCAA tournament. Nothing in depth today. Later shows in the week. Tomorrow, I'm going to really expand on Arkansas's matchups against Hawaii, potentially Wisconsin in the second round. Maybe it's High Point. Looming as the one seed for if you advance past the first weekend to the Sweet 16 would be the one seed in the West bracket, West Regional, the Arizona Wildcats. So I'm going to talk more about in depth those things, but I do have sort of an overview with my biggest three takeaways as Arkansas enters this tournament. So we're going to talk about that today. But we're going to start off with you see his photo up on the screen, Darius Acuff Jr. The accolades keep pouring in, and arguably the biggest one to this point uh, came in today. Now I'm going to set this up with what happened a few last week, and we've talked about it on one of these shows. We set it up here, but here was the tweet from a week ago. Arkansas freshman guard Darius Acuff named first team All American by the Sporting News. Now that was midweek. That was the day after back-to-back days of racking up all SEC Player of the Year, Freshman of the Year, first team All SEC, SEC All Freshman team. That was on last Monday. According to, I think that was March 9th, according to the SEC coaches. Then on Tuesday, the AP came out with Acuff, SEC Player of the Year, Freshman of the Year, and first team All SEC. The AP didn't do an All Freshman team. So back to back days there. And then on Wednesday, Acuff gets that recognition as the Sporting News All American. The reason I started with that is because today, and I've got an article already out. I reported this a couple of hours ago. And here's the tweet with a link to my article over at Hogville. On Tuesday, Darius Acuff Jr. was named first team All American by the Associated Press. This is the biggest and best of the All American teams. It doesn't get any better, it's the most prestigious. And he's only the second Razorback to ever earn that distinction. And so we've talked about that. We're going to talk more about it, but this is what it looks like now when we set this up here on the screen. In addition to that, he's now a consensus first team All American because the Sporting News and the AP are two of the four recognized by the NCAA, the four outlets that name All American teams. And so the other two are the United States Basketball Writers Association, the USBWA, and the NABC, the National Association of Basketball Coaches. We're still awaiting those lists. Consensus just means agreement. In other words, if only the AP, which is the most prestigious, named him first team All American, and the other outlets that I just named didn't, the Sporting News, NABC, and USBWA, if they didn't, then he wouldn't be a consensus first team All American. Consensus means agreement, and some people think it means the majority think this. So to get a majority, when you have four, you need three. But I've noticed over the years the NCAA recognizes if you get just more than one, so if you get two of the four, you're considered a consensus All American. So by virtue, I know this stuff sounds tedious and like, what's the point? It's big stuff. This is only the second time. Not only is he only the second first team All American according to the Associated Press, he's now in program history, he's now only the second consensus first team All American in program history. The GOAT, Sidney Moncrief, the only Naismith Memorial Basketball National or Hall of Famer, in program history as a player is the other one. Moncrief was an AP first team All American. Acuff's the second. Moncrief was USBWA, NABC. UPI had him as a second team All American. So he got three of the four. Back then, it was UPI, United Press International. UPI was the standard among this group of four, through I think the 95-96 season, a year after Corliss Williamson had already left and gone to the NBA. And then so once the UPI finished, the Sporting News then moved into that fourth slot in place of the UPI. And the Sporting News became part of that big four, establishing the standard that the NCAA recognizes. And you say, well, why those groups? Why? I mean, AP seems kind of obvious. Why the USBWA, the NABC, and the Sporting News? Because each one of those formats has a large pool of voters. Whereas some of these other outlets, it may be one person, like the Field of 68 or John Rothstein, CBS Sports, College Hoops Today, or a smaller pool of people weighing in on their list. And so the NCAA recognizes a larger band of voters in these via these outlets to establish credible All American lists. So we can, parse out what matters and what doesn't. It's not that the other opinions don't matter. In fact, the first team All American teams have been consistent with the one I came out with, the Rothstein, the Field of 68, the one I came out with I shared on one of these episodes when I had the Field of 68 Sam Lance on. It was a day before the Field of 68 put its out, and that's typically Jeff Goodman, and there are other outlets. But these are the big four. Acuff makes history, joining Moncrief. Now here's what Acuff can do to separate himself. Again, remember, Moncrief got three of the four. It made him a consensus first team All American, but not a unanimous consensus first team All American. Just a consensus first team All American. Three of four. If Acuff racks up the USBWA and the NABC, he's going to get all four of the four, and he'll be a unanimous consensus first team All American. You say, well, doesn't unanimous say it all? Why do you still need to say consensus? Because it gets confusing. Distinctions matter. You have to qualify these things. If you say unanimous first team All American, you can confuse it with a player that is a unanimous pick within one of these outlets. For example, today, the Associated Press, only one of its top five players, which represents its first team All American list, only one of those players was a unanimous AP first team All American. That was Cameron Boozer of Duke, who we've said all along is likely to be the National Player of the Year. Once the AP releases that, Associated Press usually does that a bit later after putting out the All American teams. But it seems a shoe-in for Boozer, especially based on him being the only unanimous AP first-team All-American. Darius Acuff's a first-team All-American, according to the AP, but their voters didn't make him a unanimous pick for first-team All-American. He probably had some second and or third-team votes in there as well. So we have to distinguish the difference between a unanimous first-team All-American or second-team based on voting within a certain outlet versus looking at multiple outlets to call players consensus All Americans, whatever level that is, first, second, or third team. But if you get all four, whether you were unanimous individually in each one, if you're a first team All American in the Big Four, as we've discussed, then you're a unanimous consensus first team All American. I know it's clear as mud. I love the distinctions. I get down devil's in the details. I love to drill down in the little nooks and crannies of these things and look at it historically. This is a proud Razorbacks program. A lot of great players. You go back to the triplets and Sidney Moncrief. And so now we start talking about some of these other Acuff superlatives as we wait to see what other All American teams. We're also interested to see, does anybody step out and name him National Player of the Year or a co-National Player of the Year? I can't rule it out. I think it's a long shot for that to happen with these larger groups because of all the voting. There's going to be more people that just say it's Cameron Boozer. He is a legitimate, worthy pick for National Player of the Year. It's why when I did my list and did my first team All Americans and announced that, I also announced my National Player of the Year, and I did a co-Player of the Year. I couldn't leave Cam Boozer out, but I sure as hell wasn't going to leave Darius Acuff Jr. out. He's not just the best point guard in the country; he's arguably the best player, and he's got plenty of bullets in his gun. If you want to go there, when you start talking about, well, what how does that add up? We've talked about so many of the first, and no one's a, you know, you put him in the same breath as a Pistol Pete Maravich in terms of not since that back in the 60 70 season has a player led the SEC in scoring and assists. He's the only player, he leads the SEC in assist to turnover ratio at 3-1. He's shooting nearly 45% from three. You put together some of his stats, he's the only player either in decades or ever to put together some of the excellence that he's done in terms of efficiency and volume of production. And he's on a winning team and a team that just won a championship, the SEC tournament championship. And his numbers were even better in that 3-day, 3-game run that we're coming off of going in the NCAA tournament. So let's look at some of these things in terms of what we're talking about here, and some of the things that continue to add to his resume. And this is our buddy Hog Stats. He does a great job of keeping up with all the historical. Some people think some of it's trivial, but it's data and it's significant in my opinion. And he does a great job with it. And he found per StatHead, so he's crediting StatHead here. Acuff is now the only player through Sunday, and so games resume this week around college basketball, and the stats in postseason count towards your number. So it's still a work in progress. But as of now, Acuff's the only player in D1 in NCAA D1 men's history to have 750 plus points, 215 plus assists with less than 85 turnovers in a season. And I always say sometimes when you're trying to make a point and pound a square peg through a round hole and just sort of pick and choose, cherry pick some data points to make a point, it can be a little misleading. But in Acuff's case, every time this happens, it's not misleading at all. He is a lead guard. He is an elite scoring and facilitating lead guard who takes care of the basketball. So a lot of times when you see high volume of numbers with players, what that's only part of the story. Look at their turnovers, look at their efficiency shooting, look at some other things and say, okay, their usage is really high. They chuck a lot of shots. A buddy of mine once said, a 12-year-old's favorite player, the greatest player of all time, is a volume scorer. It just chucks up a lot of shots. There's some flash that goes with that. But when you drill down on numbers and some of these things that get pulled out here, you're looking at more than just totals. You're also looking at the efficiency. How does it, how well did you really play while you did it? How did it help your team? And so this is significant. And here was another standard that came out in the same. Um, well, now I'm getting a little bit. Here we go. This was SEC Network. Acuff, first D1 player with 30 points, 10 assists in a conference tournament final in the last 30 seasons. Again, when you call someone a generational player, you got to. Who says that without finding some things that are generationally great? When you're looking at a generation or more, when the last time something's been done, or maybe it's never been done. So we just went through a couple of those examples. Obviously, Acuff had 30 points and 11 assists in Arkansas's 11-point win over Vanderbilt, two ranked teams on Sunday for Arkansas's only second ever SEC tournament championship, and now establishes Arkansas as a 4 seed going into the West region beginning on Thursday against Hawaii, 4 versus 13 seed Thursday afternoon. And so, what some more things we're keeping an eye on. This is from Hogstats website, where he does a great job of keeping totals, averages, all kinds of stuff. But Darius Acuff Jr. now is 29 points away from tying Todd Day for the all-time single season scoring record at Arkansas. When you look at points in a season total, 30 from taking sole possession, and so I mean, he could have another 30 game against Hawaii and settle it in that first round game. If Arkansas wins and advances and he gets less than 30, as I suspect Arkansas will win and advance, then he can surpass it with whatever accumulation of stats he has against Wisconsin or High Point in the round of 32. But either way, he's really close. He's in fourth place right now, 13 points away from tying Corliss Williamson, 14 points away from surpassing him to move into third place. He's only 16 points away from tying Joe Klein for second place. 17 points or more in this next game, and he'll move into the second slot right behind Todd Day. And again, if he scores 29 against Hawaii, he's going to move up in a tie with Todd Day. If it's 30 or more, obviously, he takes sole possession of the scoring title. And you say, okay, that's great. That's just incredible. Let's look at the next list. He's 3 assists away. He's already in second place all time in a single season in assists behind Kareem Reed, who's, in my opinion, Arkansas's greatest facilitator ever. Now, Acuff in a season's going to, with 3 more assists, which we think he could get early against Hawaii, he's going to tie Kareem Reed with 4. He's going to move into sole possession as the all-time assist leader in a single season. So he may accomplish that before or at least by halftime against Hawaii on Thursday. So this is also interesting because when you look at these lists, you don't see the same names in the top 10 or 11 here that you see over here on the points in a single season scoring. This is what helps make him such a special player is he is great. He's elite in more than one category, and then you throw in the assist to turnover ratio and the volume and the efficiency shooting. You know, it brings me to the point of I think he's going to get both of these records for sure. The assist, we'll have to keep an eye on the points, and see how Arkansas does, but that's probably going down too. And so when we say these things, when we acknowledge these things, I think I think we also need to say in here, this is the greatest Razorback season ever. Now we've already said that. The postseason honors are rolling in. He backs it up with performances and what he does in games. Averaging over 30 points and nearly 8 assists per game in the SEC tournament while shooting 50% from three. In postseason so far, his numbers are better than they were in what was an incredible regular season. He's got now 5 games of 30 or more points. He's got 6 double doubles. He just recorded his first double double with 30 or more points in the SEC tournament championship game. He had 37 in the opening round. 2 of the 3 games in the SEC tournament, he scored 30 or more points. We can just keep going on and on. So, in addition to the claim I've made and talked about that Acuff has had the greatest Razorback season ever, has had the greatest Razorback season ever, bar none. I'm there. You probably are too. That's my feeling on it. The other part of it is he the greatest Razorback ever? And I'm going to stop short of that. I think he's the greatest offensive player ever as a Razorback. I think before him it was Todd Day. I think now it's Acuff because he's basically putting Todd Day's and Lee Mayberry's greatness on the table together in terms of what they did offensively, effectively. Lee Mayberry, one of the greatest facilitators in school history, and who could go score. Todd Day, an electric scorer that could get it at all 3 levels and get it in all kinds of situations with all kinds of offensive craft. This is the greatest offensive player in school history now. It's the greatest season, regardless if you call it offense, defense. I'm going to go ahead and throw it in as the greatest season by a Razorback. I think the GOAT still remains Moncrief because he was great at both ends of the floor. He was not only a consensus first team All American as a senior, but as a junior, he was on those Big Four lists. He was either second or third team All American. He had helped lead teams to the Final Four and Elite Eight. And eventually, when you look at him as a pro, he's also the greatest Razorback as a pro. Younger people are going to say Joe Johnson. Joe Johnson definitely in this era of longevity did great, had greatness, had 2 more All-Star games. But Moncrief, Joe Johnson had 1 All-Pro season, a third team All-Pro NBA season, which is still great. He's a great player. He's one of the standards for a backcourt player in his era playing. But Moncrief was a 5-time All-Pro, a combination of first and second team All-Pro. So he was anywhere from among the top 5 to 10 players in the golden era of basketball. This isn't chopped liver era. It's the era that produced Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, Akeem Olajuwon. Those are just those guys. Kareem was still playing at a high level, was still an annual All-Star. It was arguably the greatest era ever in basketball. I personally think it is. And of course Moncrief was basically done when the decade turn in the NBA from the 80s into 90s, and that's when Jordan really took off, even though his greatness was already established to some level in the mid 80s through the late 80s. So there was some overlap in terms of when some of those guys got even better, but most of them that was right in the wheelhouse when Moncrief was the standard. He was a two-time all defensive player in the NBA. So when you just look at it just in the lens of a Razorback, he's the GOAT. When you look at it just in the lens of the NBA part of it, he's still the GOAT coming from this program. He's the greatest Razorback of all time. I can't get there with Acuff based on one season. Now, if Arkansas wins a national championship and he's the Final Four MVP, that puts him, that raises him even more into the conversation of GOAT because in terms of just the time at Arkansas, because Moncrief never got that. Corliss Williamson did it, and this is the thing about All American teams. Corliss Williamson was a unanimous consensus second team All American by the Big Four in both seasons 93, 94, 95, 96, sophomore and junior seasons, not as a freshman, sophomore and junior seasons. Then he was off in the NBA. He was the he was the most outstanding player of the Final Four of Arkansas's only national championship team. He was twice SEC Player of the Year. He was once the SEC Athlete of the Year. So just because he wasn't a first team All American doesn't put him in that GOAT conversation. It doesn't make him the GOAT either. That's still Moncrief. That's still Moncrief the way I see it based on everything. But Corliss is right there in that conversation, and I think Acuff, if he continues his excellence and it leads Arkansas to a Final Four and then maybe a national championship, if something like that happened, then he's got to be in that conversation. For me, this is my opinion, it's my take. For now, it's the greatest season ever as a Razorback, and he's the greatest offensive performer the program's ever seen. That's my opinion. All right, we're 22 minutes in, and it's a lot of love for Darius Acuff. It's well earned, well deserved, good for him. This is all Darius Acuff love fest right now so far. Let's throw a little bit more love to Trevor Brazile. Mate, he got snubbed by the SEC coaches when we looked at, and I won't call it as much of a snub with the AP because the AP didn't do an all defensive team. The AP didn't do an SEC third team. They just did 5-player first and second team. And that was going to be a heavy lift. But the SEC coaches, first, second, and third team, 15 players, you had an all defensive team. You had an opportunity to correctly reward Trevor Brazile with a placement there. We talked about it all season long that he's playing at all league level. But he's taken his game to even a better, a higher level. When you look at the last 5 games, the regular season final week, two wins for Arkansas after that Florida debacle, and then 3 straight wins in 3 days in the SEC tournament where he averaged a double double over 14 points and 10 rebounds per game. Was and had the stocks, man, steals and blocks. The plays he made down the stretch against Vanderbilt in the last 2.5, 3 minutes, when that game was a 2-point Arkansas lead and could have gone either way, were incredible. If you think Acuff's playing at a really high level, Trevor Brazile, and we always said he's the X factor. He is the X factor on this team. We've said it forever. Said it coming into the season that he would be, but he's playing at a great level, and it was great that he was named to the all tournament team. He got some piece of all SEC coming out of it. So there's that, I guess. Still got snubbed when we look at the regular season recognition. But again, here's our friend Hogstats with the going with Stathead again. Trevor Brazile, after Sunday, became the 15th D1 men's player since the 80-81 season. So 45 years of college basketball. 45 years. He's only the 15th player to get 50 blocks, 50 plus steals, 50 plus assists, and 40 plus made threes in the same season. Some of the other big names are Duke Shane Battier, Cooper Flagg, Alabama's Robert Ory, USC's Danny Green. Okay, those are some big names and guys that went on to play in the NBA. Now, this is a little bit of a conflated thing, only because in the 80s, yes, the 3-point line came into effect, but it wasn't really a part of the game as much as it grew into be. It doesn't take away from the accomplishment. I think had the 3-point line been as prevalent, there might have been more on this list. It's still elite. We talk about his stocks and all the time, the combination of blocks and steals, and how he was, among the leaders in the SEC. He right behind because of so many blocks that the league leader Somtu Cyril had in blocking shots, but he and TB were typically top 2 throughout the season in the combination of blocks and steals. but TB's truly a stocks merchant because there's not as many stills for Cyril, however you pronounce his name, Cyril. But for TB, he's top 10, the only player in the league that was top 10 in both steals and blocks. And he was top 5 in blocks, hovering around, between 5 and 10 in steals. So to me, even though he's not a great on ball, stopping guys, walling off drives, physical defender, the stuff he does to get and just look at the microcosm is the end of that Vanderbilt game. All those plays he made on the defensive end when we know Arkansas struggles to just consistently get stops. Vanderbilt's a great matchup for Arkansas. 2 games this season, double digit wins, 25-point blowout in Bud Walton Arena. This one settled at 11 after Arkansas took a 14-point lead with just a few seconds to play. But Brazile, it wasn't just those big threes. It was breaking up a outlet pass, getting a steal, blocking a shot. All of those things are a cluster. Those were Arkansas's defensive stops in between his two big threes that settled the issue. So this guy, when you look at stocks, it's not just about the numbers. When did you do it? He does it, and it's been other huge games this season. Go back to the Texas Tech. That's arguably Arkansas's best win of the season. We can say that it's Vanderbilt once or twice, but I think it's Tech with a healthy JT Toppin on a neutral court. I think that's probably Arkansas's best win. Either way, Brazil's been huge in Arkansas's success, and so it's good to see him mentioned with some of these names and that people, you know, it's still crazy to me, as good as he's been this season, that he got left out again on the All SEC teams. All right, let's move ahead. I get hung up on things. Let's look at some of the incoming Razorback stars, at least stars on the high school level, 5 stars. Future Hogs Jordan Smith Jr., first team, Abdu Torre, second team. They earned prestigious Naismith High School, Boys High School All American honors. You're going to notice the omission. The Naismith puts out 5-player first, second, and third team, so 15 players. 5-star, top 15 rated J.J. Andrews out of Little Rock Christian Academy did not make Naismith's Hall of Fame list. J.J. missed 42 days of basketball injured this year in a ton of games. And I don't know if that played into it. I'm going to guess that it did. I think also the fact that Little Rock Christian Academy doesn't play a national stage schedule like even some schools do in their, you've got the national independent schools like Montverde Academy where Moses Moody went as one example. But even some of the schools that aren't necessarily in that EYBL Scholastic uh, uh, field, there are still schools like Parkview and some other ones in Arkansas that go and play nationally recognized teams in some of the bigger events. And Little Rock Christian played in some good events, but they didn't necessarily play, play more of a nationally respected schedule. I'm not banging on Little Rock Christian Academy. You do what you need to do as a program. But I'm just saying there may be some things, opportunities because of how much JJ was out, and then maybe not playing as tough of a schedule in the eyes of some of these decision makers, not being seen on these national platforms going since July when it was spring grassroots basketball, and he was the MVP of the prestigious Nike EYBL Peach Jam, and that's the creme de la creme. That's the pinnacle of grassroots basketball every spring and summer. So, not on one of these teams. It doesn't mean that he didn't have an All American quality season. I mean, he averaged over 30 points and nearly 17 rebounds per game. Just insane numbers, efficient, great player. But kudos to these guys. I spent more time talking about this. Jordan Smith Jr. making the first team. I mean, when I look at this list, there's great players on here. Tyron Stokes is considered to be the best player in the country. At some point, I think Jordan Smith Jr. is going to get some recognition as the National Player of the Year for the boys in the class of 2026 high school season. I think there are going to be some outlets that recognize him as the National Player of the Year. I think they'll all have him on the first team. Abdu Torre was a chart climber, a young man that was, hovering in between the mid 20s to mid 30s in player rankings. He shot up and on three up to number 11, a 5-star. I think he's going to continue to move up. He has moved up more in some of the other services. But Naismith says, look, man, this dude was good enough to be second team. So a top 10 player, according to Naismith, because there's a third team All American list here too, and he didn't fall into the third list. He's on that second team All American team. So kudos to those guys. Well deserved, well earned. Torrey and his team checked up short in their state tournament, I think yesterday. That's okay. We know J.J. Andrews' high school career also came to an end in terms of, you know, the games that are official. Now you get All-Star season upcoming pretty quickly. The end of the month, McDonald's All-American game. How about Jordan Smith Jr. and J.J. Andrews? So J.J. Andrews is a McDonald's All-American. That is significant. Let's not leave that out. That's positive, significant, and we're going to keep our eyes on the other national All-American teams and see where and how J.J. Andrews fits into it, as well as obviously Jordan Smith Jr. I think's going to be consensus first team high school All-American, and then we'll see some more lists for Abdu Torre. And again, these guys are going to appear outside of just McDonald's All American game and some other national All Star platform opportunities. All right, let's move into what happened for Arkansas coming off the heels of that NCAA or that SEC tournament championship on Sunday. Arkansas, when Monday rolled around, you had two things. Even though the NCAA tournament had already been resolved and seedings and all that handed out, the net still updated one more time. And for the last time, it will not update again. It's over, but it updates based on the Sunday games because you haven't gotten to the NCAA tournament yet as of Sunday games. And the net doesn't always, it doesn't typically update its rankings until the next, you know, till you get to roll over to the next morning. So the tournament field was set, but the net still updated. Arkansas climbed a couple of spots up in net on Monday morning to 15th. They were 17th going into Sunday. So that's Arkansas's final net ranking. Put the Hogs ahead of Alabama, which I was keeping an eye on because the league did all it could to help Alabama, who looks like it's going to be shorthanded, by the way. I'm not going to spend any time talking about Alabama other than what I just did. But Arkansas climbed 2 spots to 15th in the final net rankings. And then later on Monday, Arkansas jumped 3 spots from 17th to 14th in this week's AP Top 25 poll. Now, this is interesting. The AP poll, once it starts, right before the beginning of the regular season, it runs every week until I think there might have been a week actually during the holiday break where I think that's true, right around between Christmas and New Year's where it didn't update. But it updates typically every week until this point. And now the AP poll will not refresh, will not put out another rankings until the end of the NCAA tournament. Once a national champion and the whole tournament's played out, a national champion is crowned, I think either that night or the following day, the AP poll will come out for one last time for the 2025-26 season, and we'll see then where Arkansas's in the final rankings. But this is the final ranking until then. So as we move through the next few weeks here in the SEC tournament, or excuse me, the NCAA tournament, they're not going to be AP updates every Monday like we've seen. All right, so that's kind of what happened for Arkansas here. So the only, I mentioned this in my NCAA tournament reaction show, Arkansas seeding. Uh, this is something I talked about in general. And then Razorback Communications put out a list of Arkansas's last 10 opening round sites by distance from BWA. And I mentioned it in my show. I said, the one thing I'm not happy about, I'm happy about the seed. I'm not happy about the region and Arkansas being sent away because Oklahoma City was right there for the taking. And here's your SEC tournament champion, the second best team in the SEC. If you want to go ahead and give the nod to Florida, which you should, because they were the regular season champs and a better record, and they destroyed Arkansas head to head. But outside of that, Arkansas was the second best team in this league. And yet you get rewarded and you're a top 15 net team, your top 15 ranking, but you get your 4 seed gets rewarded by being shipped out so far away. And I've said without having all the data in front of me, like it's not just this season. I'm like, it seems like every year lately, Arkansas gets sent to one of the coasts far, far, far away from home. And what I didn't drill down on, and I should have when I thought about it, was it's not only the wrong message to send, especially this year to this team because of what it just accomplished, but it's also the fan base. Arkansas is one of the top programs annually in the NCAA and putting butts in seats at home games. And Hog fans travel for postseason, for neutral site games in the regular season, for road games. Hog fans travel well, but they also put butts in seats at Bud Walton Arena, and they're one of the typically top 10 in the country in national attendance. So my tweet was simply this: when Razorback Communications put out Arkansas's last 10 opening round sites, Portland, it's the worst. Over 2,000 miles. Spokane, recent years, 1,800 miles. Providence, that was last year, 1,548 miles. Buffalo, 1,100 miles. Raleigh, 1,000 miles. Jacksonville, Florida, 1,043 miles. Detroit, 890. Greenville, 843. Indianapolis, 605. Des Moines, Iowa, 429. I mean, those are tough drives. Even the Des Moines, Iowa, that's a bit of a tough drive. Not just a bit of one, it just is. And you've had, you have regionals in St. Louis. This year, you've got them in Oklahoma City. You've had them in Kansas City. Arkansas doesn't get these. Why? Arkansas's had some great. Arkansas hasn't just slid in as 10 seeds or 8 or 9 seed with a losing SEC record like we saw in their most recent two Sweet 16 runs. Remember, the two Elite Eight teams were, top 2 or 3 in the SEC, had great resumes, got really good seedings, but were still shipped around and they got nothing regionally. It's happened again. And then you start thinking about, and I mentioned this when I talked about it again on my Sunday selection show. I brought up the example in Oklahoma City, Nebraska. Nebraska may have some analytics that are better than Arkansas's, but it's so close. It's also a 4 seed, and it's a team that's never even won an NCAA tournament game. Didn't win its conference championship, didn't do anything, in my opinion, to deserve that midway, closer to home kind of regional placement. And then Vanderbilt gets rewarded by getting to go to Oklahoma City as well, closer to home, doesn't have to travel as far. And I thought, well, you know what? Those could have been the 4s and 5s out west. Those two. And you could have moved Wisconsin, the Midwest region's natural for Wisconsin as well, and Arkansas, and put them in Oklahoma City. That to me is what the NCAA tournament should have done, but they didn't. Now you'll have people that unintelligently argue, well, the sites are already decided, and really there's just a pecking order because it's not just there's 4 seeds, there is an order. Typically they're ranked based on the strength of the team, but the NCAA has other little bye rules, and those bye rules are, well, we try not to have teams from same conferences play each other too soon. The idea is not in the first couple of rounds if possible. And there are 10 SEC teams, but having said that, they make changes all the time to keep certain matchups from happening so that their little bye rules don't get violated if they can help it. And so sometimes teams may end up getting slotted somewhere where normally they wouldn't, and it's not always truly naturally based on the order of strength of each seed line, is what I'm saying. And so easily the NCAA tournament could have put Arkansas and Oklahoma City. There's no excuse not to, other than they just didn't. And so, you hear me chirping a lot about how the SEC, and it's not just Arkansas. I always qualify this. I'd say it's not just they pick on Arkansas. There are other teams in the league. It's typically the charter members, and when the SEC home office in Birmingham, Alabama, wants to protect certain charter member schools for whatever reason in the in the paradigm or the vacuum of that situation in that particular sport at that time, they will. And it's typically not teams like Arkansas and some of the other, even some of the charter members in the SEC. And then the NCAA, I'm just puzzled by this. I don't know, because their committees, their selection committees change, over time, and so but it's odd. It is odd. It's less conspiracy stuff for me than I do with the SEC, but at the same time, it's a lack of respect. And I just talked about the fan part of it in my tweet. Again, here it is. You see it up on the screen. One of the most devoted fan bases. And when you talk hoop hogs and butts and seats, you're talking about a program. When you look at college basketball on any given night on any nationally televised platform, you see a ton of empty seats. At Arkansas, you would see some of that if you had nationally televised games in November and December. Arkansas just doesn't get the kind of games that will be nationally televised, and when they do, a la the ACC SEC tournament, it's a packed house. But then when you get into conference play, when the stakes are higher and the matchups are better, Butterwater Arena is always jam packed. Some of these other arenas around college basketball aren't. They're just not. Yet some of those teams are getting rewarded to play closer to home where their fans could potentially drive there. And you could say, well, you're just making the argument for the NCAA. They know that Arkansas fans will travel. No, you don't do it to the fan base every year. You give them a reason to get excited and pack a place and be a home away from home. You know, Dallas, San Antonio, wherever these places are. Like I said, Kansas City, Oklahoma City, and St. Louis this year. could have put the Hogs in Oklahoma City, easy get to for Razorback fans. And that's the fan part of it. I didn't have enough room in a tweet to talk about just rewarding the team and the players. John Calipari's done that heavy lifting. He's been talking about it all week in one form or another, going on podcasts, post whatever NCAA selection interviews, and he said it. He's kind of putting, he says two things at once. He goes, "I'm not complaining. We're glad. We're thrilled. Da 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 da." But could they, did they send us to Russia? Could they send us anywhere further? Especially after we get us on a Thursday. They gave us an afternoon game and not even a night game. Arkansas was one of the few teams still playing on Sunday, and this is why when you see some of the bigger conferences like the ACC and some of the other ones, they moved their tournament up years ago so that it concludes on a Saturday, is maybe to help their teams have an extra day of rest when the NCAA tournament rolls around. The Big Ten still plays its championship game on Sunday. There are other leagues that do. The SEC is one of them. But having said that, the NCAA tournament, I thought, did not show good judgment in sending Arkansas away. It very well should have sent Arkansas to Oklahoma City, and it should have also considered beyond the fact that the program earned it. Look, Arkansas earned that, in my opinion, by what it did on Sunday. In addition to some of the other things that have made it a great season, but the fact that this is a team down to 7 players, has been dealing with injury problems, and again just played 3 games in 3 days. I think Calipari's right. And I think you could look at maybe some other teams at the NCAA tournament that played on Sunday and maybe giving them the same kind of benefit. Wisconsin, believe it or not, is actually closer and Wisconsin didn't play on Sunday, but Wisconsin's actually closer to Oregon, I think, than Portland, Oregon, than Arkansas is. That's a potential second round matchup. Hawaii's got to travel further, but we know relative to where Hawaii is, that's probably that or San Diego was the best option for the Rainbows. So that was, a favor to them as a 13 seed. It makes sense. Why didn't they do what made sense for Arkansas? Again, I'm not going to go full conspiracy theory on that like I do with the SEC's constant bullshit in every sport. It's obvious, and I love calling it out. You won't find many journalists that like to call themselves credible that do that. I'm one who does. Years ago, I would never go near it. I've just got to a point where if it's real and I believe it is, I'm going to call it out. There's too much saying it not. This kind of thing, I can't go conspiracy theory. There's some that think, well, Calipari, because he's such a lightning rod in sports and college basketball, and he's constantly taking to airways to say what's wrong and what's right, some of his other missteps and having to vacate things, whatever, that this is the instant, this is opportunities because he's outspoken still and the different things to penalize him. Maybe there's truth to that. I don't know. I'm not in a place where I'm convinced of it and then I say, okay, that's what it is. I only bring it up because those things are out there. Believe what you want. I'm not fully on board with that kind of stuff with this committee or the previous ones, but I do wonder. And I know the committee does do things beyond, again, just the metrics and how they line up because of the things I've described. They also seem to like last year, putting Arkansas with Patino and Bill Self, the older goats, putting those coaches kind of in a head-to-head scenario. They do stuff, matchups that are intriguing based on previous matchups, that have played out either the same season or the season before. There are little things the NCAA does that tip their hand that they're beyond just the exact specific quality of each team in that snapshot of the season. There's other things at play. And so you have to not just completely rule out the idea that maybe Arkansas was disrespected with some having agendas, whether that's Calipari, the Hogs, or both. Lack of respect, I don't know, but it is disrespect, whether it's intentional or not. I mean, these are facts down here as to what's happened to Arkansas. The program's been too good. I mean, think about it. Arkansas's had 4 Sweet 16s in the last 5 NCAA tournaments, a couple of Elite Eights in there, and they don't ever get to play close to home. That's a strong program. And again, those are results. How about paid attendance? One of the strongest fan bases in the country. None of that matters. It seems to matter for other programs. It seems to, because a lot of them get repeated close to home scenarios. So, all right, my soapbox. I do lots of Ransons and Raven lately. But we got to talk about what Arkansas's got to do, because Arkansas's not going to be able to blame anybody but itself. If it doesn't do, if it doesn't perform better in certain ways than it has consistent or has been inconsistent trying to do all season, then that's talking about a scenario where you don't go unbeaten in the NCAA tournament, because the next loss, unlike the rest of the other whatever many games it's been now, 34 games, the next loss it's over. You don't get a do over. You don't get to go back, work on things, and come back and play another day. You're done. Arkansas was undefeated this year after losses, 8-0. You're done. Arkansas got off to a great start in March. This is called March Madness. Logos on the screen. 5-0 in March. Started the last day of February, the February 28th. Again, the Florida debacle down in Gainesville. Since then, 2 regular season games to close it out. Wins over NCAA tournament teams. You went 3-0 in the SEC tournament. What the championship game, an NCAA tournament team and a 5 seed in Oklahoma City. Do I need to remind you that? In that sweet Midwest bracket. So Arkansas now, it's just a different. This is even a different season. Yeah, it's postseason. Yeah, you're off to a great start, but this is win or go home, and it adds some levels of pressure. Acuff's been brilliant. He's been great. He's been dependable. He's been the best player on the court just about every game out. Maybe the Florida game he wasn't, but Arkansas as a team was completely broken at both ends, and that's mostly because it's a horrible matchup for Arkansas and a smoking hot Florida team at that time. I mean, I think Florida ended up winning 12 games in a row, 11 or 12 games to close out the regular season, and finished 3 games better than second place in the league regular season. And Arkansas caught the Gators playing at their best. But Arkansas, again, you come into this, you've got Acuff, you've got Billy Richmond playing the best basketball of his career. You've got Malik Thomas, who's a little up and down, but capable of on any night of carrying you with scoring, and he does other things. He makes good passes too. He'll rebound. He's a strong rebounder from the guard spot. He's not a great defender. He's not really yet, in my opinion, an average defender. Neither is Acuff, but he'll make plays defensively. He'll get some steals. Get some deflections. He gambles a lot, but some of that pays off. Trevor Brazile playing the best basketball of the season for him, and he's had again a lot of great moments, but it's consistent lately. Again, averaging a double double in the SEC tournament. It seems like Malik Ewan and Nick Pringle remain enigmas. Um, but they've cobbled together some really strong performances lately. It's just they don't do it every game in tandem. And so it's just real inconsistent on that front line. DJ Wagner playing his best basketball. I know the first 2 games of the SEC tournament, he didn't give a lot of production. He had a huge game in the championship game. We know what Acuff did. We know what Trevor Brazile did. DJ Wagner was a monster. So was Billy Richmond in that championship game, but absolutely DJ Wagner was. And DJ Wagner, the last 6 games of the regular season, averaged 10 points a game. He's playing off the bench, getting a lot fewer minutes. And with Acuff out for the only game this year on the road against Missouri in the season finale, Acuff gave Arkansas its best backcourt defense and, dare I say, best on-ball point of attack defense, period, regardless of position, all season long. And he's, and we see the difference with him in Arkansas's defense when he's on the court. And so Arkansas's got a lot of players playing their best, and now it's a matter of getting a little bit more consistently from both Ewan and Pringle and those other guys maintaining or even soaring even more. We'll see what happens. But I have 3 big takeaways. I've kind of started talking about some of it, but I wanted to lead into it because when you come into the tournament and Arkansas is what it is, it's a defined team right now. SEC champion, yes, but tournament champion. But let's not forget 2 double seeds that upset teams. They were hot, but they're not the quality of the league in Oklahoma and Ole Miss. They're not tournament teams. Vanderbilt's a tournament team. Great matchup for Arkansas. But that it's not on the level of some of the teams that Arkansas is going to play as soon as the Sweet 16. That's just my opinion on it. So my big 3 initial takeaways for the Hoop Hogs. These are the NCAA tournament Hoop Hogs. The other versions don't matter anymore because again, this is one and done time, and it's a whole different animal. So here are my 3 takeaways. I said this the other day. I said the West or the Midwest. I wasn't sure it was a toss up are the weakest of the 4 brackets. I think it is the West region. The more I looked at it, I didn't change my mind other than it's I I made a distinction there. I think the Midwest is the second to weakest. I think the South. I went back and forth the South and the East in terms of which one's the best. They're both really strong, um, and I kind of see it. So to me, that's still a toss up, but it's one of those two, in my opinion. It may be the East, it may be the South, but I think the Midwest and the West and Midwest are bracketed on the same side of the overall tournament. In other words, the champion from the West region and the champion from the Midwest region are going to be is going to be the matchup in the Final Four semifinals. The East and the South, I think the two toughest brackets and regions, they'll play each other. The winners that emerge from those regions in the other national semifinal game in the Final Four on Saturday, and then of course Monday, the winners of those two games play for the national championship. Having said that, I also think, even though it may be the weakest of the regions, the West, I think Arizona may be the best of the one seeds. I'm not convinced Duke is. Duke's the overall number one, won the ACC, won the ACC tournament, great season, beat Michigan head to head, beat Arkansas, played a tough great non-conference schedule. But at the same time, they got a key guy out, Caleb Foster, and I just don't know as this thing moves along the full quality of Duke with a key ingredient out, and he may miss the entire tournament. The last I heard, and so I have questions about Duke. So Arizona, to me, if it's not Duke, is the best and strongest of the one seeds. I think when you look at it backcourt and front court, Arizona's as good as there is in college basketball, and we know Arkansas can't make that same statement. Arizona is elite. And so just overall, again, I'm just kind of regurgitating what I said the other night, but I had a chance to think about it more, really drill down on it since the brackets come out, since we were on 2 days ago. And I'm still basically at the same conclusion there. So I like my initial instinct there. I'm not looking for a way to justify what I've already said. You know how I am. If I make a mistake or I rethink something I'll come back and say it and I'll own up to it. Again, I just don't see it that way. I don't see a whole lot of difference now than what I did before, just talking about that. So that's my starter. So anytime you have a weak bracket, if it is weak, I mean, all these are really good teams, but it's comparing them to the other regionals. So that's kind of an advantage, right? The disadvantage becomes if you win your first round game against Hawaii, which I expect Arkansas will, and then if you, let's say it's Wisconsin, the 5 seed in the round of 32, and Arkansas wins that. And I think if those teams match up, I favor Arkansas in a tight game and moving on to the Sweet 16. Then Arizona's any one seed's going to be a really tough out, regardless for Arkansas, especially because all the one seeds have really good front lines, and that's Arkansas's weakness. I think Arizona may be even exponentially tougher relative to the other one seeds, except maybe Florida. And so because Arkansas doesn't match up with that front line at all. But having said that, it's kind of a catch 22. I think this regional's manageable if somehow you can beat Arizona in the Sweet 16. I'm not saying Arkansas won't or can't. I don't believe they would right now based on the body of work I've seen. And I don't know that what they do against Hawaii and even Wisconsin's going to convince me that okay, they won those two games. That means I've give them a better opportunity to beat or a better chance of beating Arizona. I don't know. I need to see more, and then even then, Arizona is just a lot better than obviously Wisconsin and even certainly Hawaii. But Arizona, uh, top 5 in both defense and offensive efficiency, according to Kimball. Fifth in offense, third in defense. Arkansas, 6 now in offense, according to Kimball. So one rung lower than Arizona. And in the 40s, 48th, I think, in defensive efficiency. And again, Arizona third. It's just going to be a heavy lift. All right, so this is where I get to my second point. Arkansas must be really good or great. They've been a great offensive team, but they got to be either really good, at minimum, really good, you hope great on offense, and better connected than usual on defense. Okay, here's why I phrased it that way. Number one is you go, well, duh, Arkansas doesn't win games unless it's really good on offense. That's right. They've got to maintain that. Sometimes they're great on offense. Typically, you can count on them being really good, but it's not just about their defensive lapses. In the games where they've really been exposed, their offense crumbles too. So they've got to be consistently, they must be really good on offense. Every game in this Hawaii, all of them, they're going to have to be really good on offense and just maintain that. They got to find a way. That's got to start there. Defense wins championships. And so typically we would say, well, their defense has got to be sound, but they're defined. They do not have a consistently sound defense. So what is their strength? It is offense. So they're going to have to hit minimum. They must be really good on offense or great. That's got to be the foundation for what this team's DNA is. It's going to have to start there. On defense, I said better connected. This team overnight's not going to grow into a strong defensive team. It's just not. But what it can try to do is get better at being try to be more connected with you're down to 7 guys on the court for longer stretches and have fewer shorter stints of when you just have really bad defensive possession, teams getting all the way to the rim and you're not able to block the shot, you're getting sealed off, they go drive all the way in. You're not walling off drives from the perimeter. You're slowing your rotations and your recoveries. That defines this Arkansas defense. It's a yo-yo, but mostly, you say, well, there's 300 and something Division One teams, and Arkansas's 48. They're not that bad. We're talking about postseason NCAA tournament. We're down to 68 teams. These are the typical. Most of them are the best of the best, right? Once you get out of first round games, you can say, well, Arkansas might blow Hawaii out. That's true. They may not have to be great on offense and great on defense just to win that game, but we're talking about once you get to the the round of 32 and beyond, these are the things Arkansas is really going to have to do. And so, connected on defense, just minimize the ugliness and be more connected. I don't know, or better connected. I don't know how deep that's going to have to run to beat Wisconsin. It's going to have to run really deep that scenario to beat Arizona. So these number one seeds, they very rarely lay an egg. You would just have to be better than them or be better that day, and they rarely lay an egg on that day. You just have to be really, really good yourself and just hope that somebody has an off day, at least one guy. Maybe 2. Maybe you're part of maybe there's a matchup that works in your favor that, they haven't seen this year because they didn't play in the SEC or Arkansas. The Big 12 is a tougher league. It's one of the things I said about Arizona. Those Big 12 teams, I think Big 12 was the best conference at the top in college basketball. The SEC is the deepest, but at the very top, it was the Big 12. You're talking about with a healthy JT Toppin, which he played 25, 26 games this year, most of league play. Houston, outside of Arizona, Houston, Iowa State, those are two seeds. Kansas is a 4 seed. That league is loaded at the top. And so those teams getting more of those reps against teams they could see as soon as maybe even by the final Elite Eight or Final Four. I don't think the SEC has that kind of DNA this year like it did last year. And so it gives Arizona even more advantage. So Arkansas is going to have to navigate this field and have any chance of getting to a Final Four. They're going to have to be great at what they do best, or really, really good in concert with being better connected, because they're not going to become again a great defense. I just don't see that. If that happens, then why the hell do they wait so long to flip the switch? Right? I mean, I'll take that if they can be a great defense in the NCAA tournament. I'm not going to poo-poo it and say, well, that doesn't count. You should have been no. I'm just saying, do you see a pathway to it? I don't. But they had great stretches in games. I mean, the end of the Vanderbilt game, 2 minutes to go, 2.5 minutes to go. In the NCAA tournament, I think if you're not great defensively or really good for 40 minutes, maybe you'll need to be that for more than 2 or 2.5 or 3 minutes, like we saw against Vanderbilt. Maybe the last 5 or 6 minutes. There was a stretch for 8 minutes there where Vanderbilt, before we got there, didn't have a field goal. Kept getting invited to the free throw line by the SEC officiating crew. It was the only way they were able to stay within that one possession deficit at that point. But still, you may have a game that doesn't go your way with the calls like that. So you're going to have to be better connected on defense. I think because we see individuals make plays. When you look at Arkansas's, typically when they have a game where they win against quality, you're looking at the shot blocking. They had 5, 6, 7 for 3 games in a row. They had 10, or in one game 11. And a lot of that's individual, coming from the weak side or recovering after blowing up the initial assignment and just using your athleticism and length. That's not defensive connectivity. Those are individual plays. Because Arkansas rotates really slow too on help stuff. It's just some of these guys are athletic, long, and sometimes their instincts kick in, sometimes they don't. So I'm looking for more than that. Again, I'm looking in, and when Arkansas has DJ Wagner on the court and Nick Pringle, believe it or not, Trevor Brazile and Billy Richmond, when those four are on the court, and let's say it's Acuff or Malik Thomas out there with them, that's Arkansas's best defensive group. That's their best hope of being their best defensively. But it's not always going to work like that. Sometimes you need Acuff and Thomas on the court together. They start games together. And because of Arkansas's rotation and the foul trouble that Pringle usually gets in, Ewan's going to have to play. Ewan's a strong offensive rebounder. There are things he brings to the table that don't necessarily factor into your defense, other than by getting offensive rebounds, it keeps the other team from getting to its offense. So that's kind of defense in that weird, disconnected sense. I know I'm kind of rambling now. I'm trying to phrase this in a way that explains how I don't think Arkansas is going to, become a great defensive team overnight. But maybe there are stretches of the game where they can be more connected defensively, somehow figure out to get their best defenders, get more minutes out of them together, while at the same time relying on their offense to maintain what it's been all year, virtually elite. All right, we've rolled an hour and a minute. I like to talk. I proved it today. You're welcome, I guess, if you like that kind of thing. If you don't, my apologies. Let's sign off by recognizing him one more time. Darius Acuff Jr., Arkansas freshman guard, now a consensus first team All American, picked up the most prestigious of the All American team honors today. Associated Press already had the Sporting News. Now we keep an eye on again USBWA, NABC, and of course everybody's top of mind is what Arkansas is going to do in the tournament. And again, my Wednesday show tomorrow, I'm really going to start drilling down on matchups. We're going to look at Arkansas, Hawaii. I'm going to talk about High Point, Wisconsin. We're going to talk Arizona. We'll even, pull back a little further view and look at what it would take on the other side of the bracket with the 2 seed, Purdue and some of the other teams on that part of it. We're going to get more into the West region on Wednesday. And then, of course, Thursday, I'm torn between doing a pregame show early that morning and then doing a postgame show. I probably will do it that way. So we'll have at least 2 shows connecting Tuesday to Wednesday to Thursday. Certainly a post-game show Thursday, but maybe also a pregame. So at least 2 shows, maybe 3 upcoming. And hope you all tune in. As always, if you haven't done it already, please hit subscribe, like, and share. That helps us out. Chime in with comments after the fact. Hype up the content if you liked it. Turn the notifications on. We got recruiting intel upcoming too, man. I'm working on several goodies that I'm going to share. I don't know if it'll be tomorrow or Wednesday or Thursday, excuse me. But we're going to have some more recruiting intel as well. Until next time, hope you're having a great week. Be great in all your endeavors. We shall see you soon.